Testing one, two. Hi, Larry. If you're watching, I'm just getting ready for the meeting with James. So didn't realize it was going to automatically start recording.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
I gotta get another light. I'll be
I
right
can,
back.
okay, I can see you.
What is this about? I don't even know what this is about.
Just go with the flow. Just go with the flow. It's probably better that way.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just showing up.
I'm going to ask you questions, and then we're going to just have a conversation. It should take anywhere between half an hour and probably 45 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Let me. I have to get a lamp. I'll be right back.
Careful what you're saying. We're already being recorded.
Well, fuck that.
Yeah, fuck that.
Where'd that lamp go? I can hear you. The speaker on my computer is like screwed up, so I have to use earphones.
Oh, got you.
But I can hear you. Right now. I just took them off. It's fuzzy, but
I'll wait till you're ready, and then we'll kind of do an official start. I have a list of instructions.
yeah, I think I got the same thing. Let's see if this works.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you stuff
How's this?
that's good. It gives us sort of the dystopian 21st century. Who are you and where were you all your life? Okay. So I'm going to ask you things that I already know, but let's pretend I don't. And then there's a certain amount of improvisation I think that's allowed in this as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start. So I'm Jeff McKinnon, and it's June 20th, 2025, and I am in Solvang, California. And it's your turn now.
Yeah, I was just putting I'm a senior citizen. I was just putting my earphones in. Actually, it was suggested that we put a book under this. So that would be like this. That's too official though. So I'm gonna hover. I like the clown nose.
I like the poster in the background.
That's right. So I'm gonna keep that.
Okay.
Light's better. I know space, so I can like frame myself. So my turn is I'm James Donlon, and I showed up for this interview.
And where are you, James?
I'm in Ashland, Oregon.
Okay. So it's Friday morning. I'm going to ask you some questions, and we'll start with some easy ones, and then you can go off on any tangents you want. So tell me about. Let's start with your childhood. You have kind of a childhood that's ever evolving in terms of the information, but let's go back to like your family. What was your family like growing up, and where?
Well, that's a very complex question because I'm adopted. So I was adopted at 2 weeks old, and I was born in Oxnard, California. And there's kind of a scandalous mystery behind my birth mother in terms of my her pregnancy. She was I'll tell you a little bit of the story. It's a good
Yeah, do.
story. So my birth father was in the Merchant Marine, and my mom, who was a jitterbug champion on the East Coast in the 30s and 40s, I think the 40s mostly. Um, they were a couple for a while, and she got pregnant. I actually interviewed her at one point before she died. I found her at age 62. There's a lot of stories here, but anyway, she said that he was the only one that ever got to her, and she slept on her stomach because in those days there was the myth that if the woman was inseminated, that if she slept on her stomach, she wouldn't get pregnant. But she got pregnant. So my birth father hung around for I think 2 months, but she didn't want to marry him for some reason. I think there was a class issue because she came from a very uppity North Carolinian family who were lawyers, worked in the State Department. One guy, I think my grandfather on her side was a district attorney for the state of North Carolina, the Eastern District. I don't know. But anyway, so she ended up marrying a guy who was a cousin of Frank Sinatra, an Italian guy, and he worked in her office at Langley Air Force Base, which is the forerunner for NASA back in the day in Virginia. She was a very interesting woman, actress, math teacher, Cadillac car dealer, manager of a gas station. Anyway, so he said he would marry her. His last name was Mastrocola. He said which is a classic Italian. He said he would marry her if she gave me up for adoption. So she didn't tell anybody that she was pregnant in her family, even though she was very close to her sisters, which is hard for me to believe that her sister didn't know. And they traveled to California, where they had jobs at Point Mugu outside of Oxnard in Ventura County, and he was working in the UFO division of the Navy, and I'll bring that back in a moment because it's interesting. So I have a picture of her pregnant in front of the Ventura Mission, in front of the fountain, and she gave birth to me, unbeknownst to the relatives on the East Coast, and she wanted to keep me, but he said no, you got to give me up. So she reluctantly gave me up, and I never saw her again until I was in my early 60s, even though she lived in the area until I was 16. And she actually acted, as this interview will reveal. I've had a life in the theater. That sounds pretty grandiose, but I guess that's what you'd call it. But she worked in my area until I was 16, but I never knew it. And she acted for the local theater company. And I must have read some reviews in the Oxnard Press Courier about her. Her name was Phyllis Parker. Anyway, the Italian dude was an adulteress, and she divorced him and went back to North Carolina when I was 16 and never got married again, never had another kid. But the point is, I was christened James Mastrocola when I was first born for 2 weeks.
Just a sidebar. Are you actually related to Frank Sinatra?
No, because he wasn't. He wasn't the father of me.
Oh.
My birth father was in the merchant. You're not listening. He was. he
What'd
he
you
was.
say?
See, this interview could go a long time. We're just gonna, you asked me about my childhood, and it's been 5 minutes. I'm talking about my birth. So anyway, I was born, and I grew up I was adopted by like pioneer farming families in Ventura County that had arrived in the county in 1860 by way of Ireland, but also through up where you live, up or where you grew up. I think they were in Dublin and Concord and Walnut Creek. I think there's a Donlon Avenue up there actually.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, he was a Vietnam dude, so he's a distant relative, I'm sure.
Hmm.
So I was born and I grew up in farming families, so I was around ranches, and my dad was a man of the sea. which is interesting because my birth father was a man of the sea.
Hmm.
It's a very close kind of coincidence. So I grew up around boats, the Channel Islands, ranches. I developed asthma really bad because I was allergic to lima bean dust, because in those days lima beans were one of the major crops of Ventura County, and I grew up in a small ag town, Camarillo, which is now a kind of like a bedroom community for LA, I guess. But so I had a very rural childhood. I learned to play basketball, and I became pretty good at that game because, I had the hoop and myself, and that was it when I was a kid. So I was very active physically, roaming the orchards and, going hunting with my dad in the foothills. And that's where I grew up. And I had lots of cousins, but I was an alien. And let me just finish by saying, so I was very athletic. My family weren't. I was very creative. My cousins weren't an artist like me. My mother was a painter, like an artist. So that's the connection I had to the art. And she taught me a lot about perspective and color and the eye, how to see things, time and space. She was a history buff. So I was very interested in social movements of the world. But I was born on June 29th, 1947, which is the day they discovered the alien in Roswell, New Mexico. So as I was growing up, I had a very happy childhood. I wasn't curious about my background, but I thought I was an alien, or maybe an experiment planted by the aliens on that day to grow up in the USA. And I'm pretty good at mime, which you've seen. I'm probably one of the best there ever was with illusion mime, and it's magical. And I don't really quite understand how I have that talent, but it's in me. I'll do things like the point in space. Every joint in my arm will move correctly to isolate a mimetic point in space. I don't know how I do it. I just have it. So I think I could be an alien, and when I
So
die,
you don't know,
I'll go back to the planet somewhere.
you don't know who your birth father is.
I do. I did. I met
No,
my.
it could be a space
I
alien.
yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe he made love to a mermaid on one of his sea voyages, and I don't know. I have the
Um,
DNA.
so you talked about basketball. We'll get back to that, I'm sure. But when did you discover that you had this ability to automatically create illusion with your body?
Well, I always had a rich imagination. That's why I said the rest of my family didn't weren't on my wavelength. So I was a loner. Like when we'd have big family gatherings like Christmas and Thanksgiving, I was always out in the orchards. I never hung around people much. And my cousins always told me, you'd be a really good teacher, which didn't mean anything to me at the time. And, as fact was, I became a teacher, a pretty good one. But what was the question?
When when
When
did
did I discover?
when did you become aware? And yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really know. I mean, basketball, just bringing that a little bit in, is about illusion. If you're a good offensive player, you know how to use space in deceptive ways. You can fake here, but you really want to go there. You can make people believe you're going to do something. A large part of sports is that, it's in those kind of team sports. Baseball is a little different because I don't think you trick people, you just do it. But
Mhm.
basketball and soccer and things like, and to maybe tennis, you trick people to what you're going to do. So I didn't really discover I have this mime talent until I was in college, my senior year in college. So it was pretty late, in the beginning acting class.
So you were a basketball player in college, but you took a drama class.
Yeah, my whole identity in high school was basketball. I mean, I was passionate. I still am passionate about it. I watch everything there is on TV. But so I played college basketball at my height, which I was 5'11". I shrunk an inch or two, like since then we all shrink, but I was just under 6 foot, and I could jump really high because my birth mother told me before she died, she used to be a really good jumper and would hover above her classmates. And somehow I inherited that ability. So I could dunk the basketball in the 60s at 5'11" easily. And So I became a really good basketball player, and I played in college at Humboldt State, which is like a division. If you know about sports, it's Division II. It's not like the top, but it's pretty good level. The only difference between Division II and Division I is the players are bigger in Division I, but there are a lot of skilled players in Division II that aren't just as big, you know. So uh, I became a basketball player, and then the business of sports, college sports, wore on me, and I was the starting. In those days, they called them combo guards. You were a point guard and a shooting guard all in one, and I was the starting player, one of the better players on the team my senior year. I had already played 3.5 years, and I was injured. That's a whole story in itself, you know, the whole saga of basketball. But I quit the team at mid-season. I said I need a break, and I never came back. And I took an acting class, and that the rest was history. I just, you know, found a niche, and I remember saying to myself, "You can really do this. You can do this theater stuff." My theater teacher, who was very first acting teacher, was a British graduate assistant. He was a little older than me, just this amazing guy. He inspired me so much, and he was British, and he had like striped socks, and he had a beard. He had no tie because I was a science major for my first 2 or 3 years in college because they all pushed us to beat the Russians. You know, like at that time, Sputnik was going on, and you know, I discovered very soon that I wasn't made out to be a scientist because I flunked chemistry. But this drama class with this guy who had a beard, and he said fuck that in class. You know, it was like, whoa, what world is this? You know, and I was good at physicality, and he invited me to perform in a park for a festival as a mime, a roving mime with tights and a kind of Hamlet shirt, you know. And that was the beginning of my mime career.
What was your teacher's name? Do you remember?
His name was Philip Mann. He was a very well-known science fiction writer. In fact, if you were still teaching at Santa Ynez, but who knows what you'll be doing or directing in the future, I was given permission to adapt one of his books. That's an amazing book called Eye of the Queen to the stage. Maybe that's a project you and I can do someday. It's a really good saga. He wrote with the eye of the actor and director. His writing is very visual and very visceral, very visceral, more so than most writers. And he was a science fiction writer, so he had the fantasy and the imagination. He died a couple of years ago. He started the theater movement in New Zealand. After he left Humboldt State, he went to New Zealand, and he became a major player in the theater in New Zealand for decades. So
What year was this? I'm curious.
this would have been 69, 70,
So,
1969,
so this
19
was
when I was with him.
this was at a time when physical theater was still more practiced and taught.
Well, it was in its golden years in the United States, if not the world, because physical theater rises its head when there's social unrest. And as we all know, the 60s were, I feel lucky to have been nurtured in the 60s because it really informed my sense of the world. We had assassinations, we had the Vietnam War, we had civil rights, we had free love, we had hippies and so forth. We had drugs that all came together in that post 50s era. So the age was incredibly rich. So physical theater, mime, clown, classic clown, and Commedia dell'arte, meaning the San Francisco mime troupe or meme troupe, as they used to call it, which is really not a mime troupe, but a commedia, street theater,
Right.
very political. Those kinds of theater, that kind of theater really would blossom because you could communicate, you know, uh, information very in a very political and social way, and that's happened throughout history. Actually, like it's no uh, accident that there's a lot of clowns in Shakespeare because clowns and mimes were kind of prophets of the age, and they were allowed to flourish because they could speak power to truth. So that through the late 60s and the 70s and the middle to the mid 80s, there's a 20-year period when physical theater was was very recognized. It was a mainstream art. In fact, to the point there was a Robert Shields performing on network TV as a mime, you know. So very interesting. Now it's a dirty word, you know. Now it's a joke, the word in the world, you know. So in fact, it's getting more. It's getting kind of weird itself. Like some of the stuff I see, you know, we're all curmudgeons, right, in our age, but a lot of the clowning today is vomiting therapy with no
Mm.
artistic quality to it. I don't think, you know.
So what happened? Why did
With
the
that,
golden age end? What's that?
I think technology happened. I think you know, the internet and things like that killed mime, but it also killed a lot of the performing arts. And if not, they're not killed them, but suppressed them to a point where if you go to a you know, a play or a Shakespeare festival, that you're an elite person, you know, that the general public does not go to these things. And it's becoming more so with Trump, you know, trying to take over the Kennedy Center and all that, you know, authoritarian. I mean, it's incredible what's happening. But on the other hand, because I said physical theater rises up when there's social unrest, there is a giant movement of clowning in the world today, but it doesn't know what it's doing really. It can't. It's not formed. It's not crafted. It's more like knee jerk reaction, you know, to what's going on, rather than framing it as an art with all the other mystical aspects of it.
We recently watched some people who were admirers of Robert Shields, who kind of these younger guys doing some stuff, and to my eye, it it um, it looked like imitation rather than the real thing. And
Yeah,
so
there's no soul. Like in that period of time, late '60s, and I was actually in the vanguard there in the whole West Coast. There were probably there was a guy in Portland, Francisco Reinders, who was older than me from Europe. I think he was Dutch. That worked at. I think he was at what's that very progressive school in Portland?
Reed,
Reed. It's either that one or there's another one. I think it was Reed. He was there. Richmond Shepard was in L.A. who was older than me. These people have since died. That's about it. Even in San Francisco, I was one of the. I mean, I had some contemporaries in San Francisco, but our small group were on the West Coast. We're in the vanguard of all this, and then there was the East Coast, which had its practitioners. Excuse me, like Tony Montanaro and people like that. But we never. USA in that time was very big and very isolated. The East and West Coasts are very separated. So the mimes never communicated in the late '60s and '70s, except at these big festivals. And there was kind of a gentleman's competition or madam's competition between the two coasts in terms of who was doing stuff. And there was a different genre. I think the West Coast was a little more explosive. I mean, just you know, that's the cliche, right? The West Coasts are the more progressive kind of dreamers, you know, than the East Coast. That's my impression. But I did
music
spend
too.
it. Go ahead.
I said in music too. You at the same
Yeah,
time, the West Coast music was different than the East Coast
which is
music.
interesting you bring that up because when the all that rock and roll happened in San Francisco with the Fillmore Auditorium and what's his name? Who's the producer?
Bill Graham.
Bill Graham. When that was happening, mime be, came into the public's eye because a lot of not a lot, but a few mimes would perform as opening acts for rock and roll concerts.
I remember seeing the Flying Karamazov brothers at Winterland when I would see the Dead,
Yeah. I mean,
and
it was a big deal, you
they
know,
were
that,
amazing. They were amazing,
yeah,
and they started as audience members, just creating their own scene in the back of the house, and they ended up being on stage. And I think they ended up going to Vegas too, kind of like Robert Shields.
yeah. Robert Shields opened for, I think, the Rolling Stones and people like that in San Francisco. Like because he was you know, you and I just saw that documentary, and which we're going to show at our Mime Festival in September in LA. And he's actually he told me I talked to him on the phone the other day. He calls me up and sends me photographs of us when we were younger. Like, you know, he said that he's thinking of showing up actually, and because to like talk about his film when we show it, which would be great because he has a big following with, as you said, with these hip hoppers.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's like a god to these people, like, and they have no idea. They just make the moves. They don't have the storytelling,
Yeah, it's all on the outside.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, that was an interesting period. And then like I said, I think technology and the internet and then all that started to suppress the arts in general, and people get their entertainment a different way now. You have to see mime, even though mime plays really well on video, as you know, there's nothing like it live. I mean, it's a live art where you feel the sweat and the movement.
Right. Well,
So
it's theater. Theater's the same way. It's just
right,
it's just a ghostly image on tape.
right.
You I want to talk a little bit about you talk about the competition, and you guys were able to kind of recognize who were your peers, and
Yeah, it's an interesting world. Like I said, I came out of basketball, so which gave me an advantage actually in theater, because I remember from the very beginning, like auditioning, even though it's a weird form, was kind of a fun thing for me because I was in competition, and I know some other times I would audition or play in a piece. I enjoyed the being in the crucible with others, and the
mm,
survival of the fittest in sports and theater survives, right? So I remember I could intimidate. I remember I auditioned for this thing called Affiliate Artist, which was an interesting program, which really helped me see the United States. It was a program in the very early '80s out of New York, where if you got on their roster, which was really hard, it was a 3-tier thing. You had to audition, then you had to work with an advisor who was another artist, and then you had to do a live performance that would be observed before you could be admitted to this program. And the program was you would travel, you would be sponsored by business in the USA, anywhere in the USA. In fact, I performed once in a lodge for the Rangers at Yosemite Park. Among other places, I performed in oil company boardrooms. You would go to a community, usually rural in the USA, and you would be sponsored by Sears or somebody like that. And you had to say, I'm a Sears artist, even though I didn't. I was clandestine. I would never say about that. And nobody was watching me from the company, the affiliate artist. But I never did that, but
sticking it to the man.
you would perform in these communities for a week. And you do these things called informances, which was kind of a combination of a lecture, demo, and a performance. You do it on site specific areas. Like once I performed in a place in the Appalachia in a hardware store, that was a slash dry goods store. Like it was like a one stop town, You do that. And at the end of the week, you do a formal concert in a local theater to get people to come. So I did that for 2 years, and it was a cool experience. But I remember when I auditioned for them, getting back to the competition, I went in and in sports you warm up, you do a lot of warm ups. So I was used to the discipline of sports as an actor, which all actors should be anyway. They should practice their craft and prepare themselves. So I was in that mold. So I'd warm up vigorously, and all the other candidates would be watching me, and they'd all get kind of unsettled because of my intensity as a artist warming up, and that was all came from sports, you know. So the other thing was if you didn't do well, you just took it in stride, because in sports you have to get up and keep going, and so that mentality helped me a lot, even though it kind of, when I became a teacher, occasionally my coach side would come out, and that would rub people the wrong way, so I had to be careful with my personality as a sportsman sometimes later on, so
Um, when did you realize? Was it through these early gigs that you started to realize that you were really good?
yeah, that's interesting. Like as an athlete, I was, like I told you, I was either like all world or all in the tank, because I was very emotional, and things would fester in me. So, but I knew I was good, but there's always somebody better in sports, particularly. There's always somebody better. I can remember playing in San Francisco at some gym, and like, who the hell are these guys? I was like a flea, like even though I had been a higher level player, like, but in theater, I used to enjoy the physicality of the sweat and the effort. And then when I was in school, I would work out in the foyer with a large glass window, like a fish tank. And at night, it was opened on a quad to the art complex. The art building was across the quad with some steps, large steps. So I'd be just doing my moves, and I'd look out and I'd see like 25 people just sitting watching me like a show.
Mm.
So I was going like, whoa. And it was like a fit, like it was at night usually, and there'd be the foyer would be lit inside, and there would be this glass, large glass window, and they'd all be watching me like in a fish tank, right? So and then during performances, I used to get a lot of oohs and ahs at times, like, oh, and you'd always get standing ovations. So all that put together, and then the icing on the cake was when during these festivals, like in those days, you had to go to a regional drama festival to be recognized because there was no video or internet. You had to be seen by future presenters before they'd hire you, right? So my partner Bob and I did several of these drama conferences in the Northwest, Northern California, Northwest. So I'd be teaching workshops, and like PhD theater people would be listening to me, and I'd go like, this guy, I don't know, I'm just a mime with a BA, and these guys are taking the gospel of James, and that all went into me. I'm going like, so I must have something here,
Mm.
like that's working, So
Who was Bob?
Bob Francisconi is a close friend. He's my brother in art. He grew up in Eureka, California. His grandfather was a bootlegger in Eureka. Very Italian family. I mean, very Italian. Classic immigrant family. And he remembers his father telling him that they'd ride in the back alleys of Eureka, like delivering booze to the speakeasies, and stuff like that. But Bob grew up there. He was a very humble guy. He played football in a small Catholic school. He went to Loyola University as a freshman in LA, and he hated it. And he came back to Humboldt State, and we became friends when we were in the theater department. And because he had been an athlete and he had, a take on nature, and a large part of my work is fantasy and nature images, like elements, and the dream state in terms of natural forces is something I appreciate a lot. So we worked together, and because he'd been an athlete, we could drill ourselves, and we became a duo, and we toured all over the Northwest in the late early 70s.
Mm.
So, and he was the moon and I was the sun. That was our character. He was the hero and I was the Arlecchino, in terms of I was fire and he was, what was he was very mystical in a way. People were attracted to him. I remember we'd teach workshops, we'd each teach our own, but in the same time frame. And I remember mine was over. We were in Boise at Boise State at a big drama conference. I went over to watch his workshop, and he was like a guru sitting there with everybody around him. But anyway, he followed me to the North Carolina School of the Arts. I was able to get him a job there because we're always looking for a umbrella for our work in those days. We had a scheme. We approached it very businesslike in terms of surviving as a theater artist outside of the mainstream.
Mm.
So we felt that if could get hired by a conservatory or a university, that would give us a lot of support, which it did. So anyway, I got this job at the North Carolina School of the Arts, which was part of the League of Professional Theater Training Programs at that time, like the NYUs and the Yales and the SMUs and Carnegie and all those.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to talk them into hiring him. And then I left a year later and went on my other sojourns. But he and I, we developed all our techniques together. He's a very close friend, and yet I'm the one that has to call him. He'll never call me. Even though he says he loves me, he'll never. It's a very complex relationship I've never really talked to him about, but he's a year younger than me. He lives in North Carolina. He's retired now.
He stayed.
Yeah, and we've talked for we started 55 years over 55 years ago as a
Huh,
mime duo.
I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
you were only a year at NCSA?
No, I was there for a total of 3 years. I'd been there 2 years before Bob came and joined me,
Hmm.
and then the grass was greener for me. And at that time, I was doing really well as a mime. I was doing European tours and Mexican tours, and I wanted to strike out on my own. So my girlfriend was a big time modern dancer from New York. So I moved to New York with her. She had been an artist in residence at the North Carolina School of the Arts. She had been in the Graham Company and the Jose Limon, these big time pioneer dance figures. So I went to New York, and a year after Bob and I were there, and so we split up at that time. We had dreams of in fact, this is something I don't know if I have a regret, but they offered me a state supported mime school in North Carolina in the late 70s, and I turned it down. And I'm just wondering I mean, I was just young, I was still only like 32 or 31, like when I left. So
Well, knowing you in these last few years, I mean, and I don't know if you remember saying this last time I saw you, and I quote you, you said, "Mime is dead."
I think it is now. I used to reject that, but I think, how do I explain it? It's not dead, but it's not recognized as anything, as a form at all. It's sort of a side joke.
Do
However,
you,
when we did this LA Mime Festival last year, it was surprising how many people came to do the workshop and watch the excuse me
it's all right.
watch the performances. There's a mystical quality to good movement theater that you can't put your finger on, and you can't describe it. There's so many elements of craft and imagination that goes into it, and it's a discipline. You can't do it just off the cuff. You have to work at it.
Right.
Those of us that have some kind of innate talent or get there quicker, but you have to really, it's like being a ballet dancer. You have to train to really be good, and most people can't do that anymore.
You've had a long career as an independent.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that you're you get tired of institutions when you're involved in them, and you just move on? Because
That's a issue that's just innate to me. Like I like to build things. I mean, even in my hobbies, like I'm a model railroader, which that's a whole nother subject I don't share too often, but
right.
I build worlds, in closed spaces that I don't let anybody else see, so that they don't need to see it. But
I've
I
seen it.
tend to move on. I tend to build something and then I'll move on. Like I've had two studios in San Francisco, two mime studios, and they both flourished, especially the last one, like about 15 years ago. And after 3 years, I moved on. I've been married 4 times. I'm not going to get a divorce again. It's not worth it. But I'm just saying, I tend to move on once I have kind of built something. So that's a problem that I have to look at, sometimes.
Well, the term mime, James is a mime, is too limiting, and even I think, would you agree that people's idea of what mime is a very limited concept compared to the way you see it?
Yeah, it's very limited. It's the cliche is the man in the box, in the glass box, you know.
Right, with the white
So,
face.
and the white face and the striped shirt. But most of my work throughout, I've never done a man in a box. You know, this flat surface technique, I'm really good at it, but I only use it. I always felt mine was a means to ideas and a means to magical transformation of space.
Hmm.
And I feel, like I talked about being an alien. I always felt it was kind of an alien, unexplained art form. Like I always felt it should be studied by scientists, because I think the use of energy is unique that you don't see other places. And I think it should be studied how that happens, um, in terms of the execution of some of the moves.
Yeah, you brought a hush to a group of my students one day when you were doing the one with the rod where you would bend the
Yeah.
rod, and you were explaining to them that I can actually see the rod. Maybe you can't see it, but if you do it long enough, you'll be able to. And they were like, no, no, it's not. You're just saying that. You're like, no, I actually can see the rod.
Yeah, when I was younger, we all get older. I think some of my skills have eroded, of course, which is natural. But when I was younger, I could see a white aura between my hands. I swear to God, I could see a white aura of energy, like a Star Wars weapon. I could see something between my hands, and sometimes it would be a white aura of a line, and sometimes it was just a black line. I could actually see stuff. So I felt there's something I'm doing with my mind that's going through my body into my hands, and it's going into the air. There's some scientific thing happening. I feel that happens, and I don't, and it's not. Nobody knows that. Nobody's studied that. There's something there. Because when I was young and in my prime, man, I would do these illusions, and people, their eyes would pop out. Like it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. One of your early when I first saw you perform, you came to our high school in 2006, and there's a great video of that performance. The quality of the video is not great, but your performance was inspired that day. And one of the bits you did was you as a child lying on the floor playing with soldiers and
Right.
how
That's a piece called Growing Up. It's a piece
how
called Growing Up. Yeah.
how important were those, I mean, moments of fantasy as a child in terms of your development as a.
Well, they were incredibly important. You have to remember that we didn't have computers, we didn't have video games, we had books. I read a lot of books and looked at a lot of pictures. I mean, I grew up in a family that nurtured that, but my mother particularly was very nurtured. My father, my adoptive father, was an inventor. I mean, he was always building things. Legitimately building things. He built beach cleaners and he built boats and he designed a marina. And I grew up with, your dad fixed the house, like jury rigged the plumbing, like dug a hole and put some weird pipe in to fix the plumbing. It was that era, it was like Depression era of people that grew up trying to, they had to make do with themselves. So, uh, wait, tell me the question again. I'm getting a feel. What did you say?
How much time as a kid did you spend
Oh
alone
yeah.
playing fantasy games?
So I grew up in this very creative household. We had no computer. We had no internet. So toy soldiers and toy figures, toys, electric trains, those kind of, toys or activities were, so important to just being a kid because you grew up in this world of imagination. When you read a book, your imagination would, like books should do, they set you off into those worlds, in your mind. So I always felt a little bit, like a lot of actors and theater people and dramatic people say, you're still a kid when you're growing. You take those qualities and you're still doing it when you're older. You're playing with your imagination. So that was very important to my upbringing. I could draw really well, so that has some connection to the mime work because doing the mime is somewhat like being you're sculpting the air. You're designing the space or the stage. When I first got into theater, I thought about being a scene designer, a set designer. But I'm physically active, so I move more toward the actual performance side. But yeah, so that was very important, that sense of play and creativity, building worlds, even outside and inside. I used to have a broomstick, that was my horse, and I would ride around the house 3 times, and that meant I was going from Drywell, Arizona to like Phoenix or something, or to Tucson to get the bad guy, and I'd pull up at on the front porch on my horse, and I'd step off and lean against the post and chew tobacco. That's what I did, and I did it by myself because the other kids couldn't hang with me. Like, here's a good example. Like, you're telling me that you were saying playing with these. So I used
Yeah,
to make
eating
these
noises.
soldiers fall in slow motion. I would have very elaborate deaths and gunfights, and the other kids, if you're gonna have a car go off a cliff, I would do the whole thing slowly, but the other kids would just push it off, right? But I that was going, what are you doing? You can't do it like that. It was a big deal. Like, so I tended to play alone a lot because the other kids didn't have the fertile imagination to create reality. So
The dramatic timing.
exactly.
Really, that's what it is.
I
It's
know. Did you
almost.
did you did you do the same thing, or you're a little bit after
Oh,
me?
I
So
did. I had a sandbox in my backyard that my dad built me, and I had toy soldiers that I would create battlefields and worlds.
right,
And slowly I'd destroy the battlefield,
right,
but it wasn't just like a wipeout. It was
yeah, exactly.
yeah. And I used to play with a wiffle ball and a bat in my backyard, and I would play 9 inning games by myself, every batter batting, and they had names and they had and
Yeah, that's my brain too.
well,
I would,
yeah,
yeah,
and I think we sort of connected on that level because one day you showed me your train set. Um,
right.
I was honored by to be led into the inner sanctum, and I was just blown away with the cutouts, and you had the whole the mountains from down around Camarillo,
Yeah,
and
I'm very much into recreating. I probably would have been good as a like working in Hollywood as a prop builder,
scenic
or a
design.
diorama builder. But
Yeah, right.
I need to move. Right, I'm becoming less so like that. I'm becoming more prop designer like. But anyway, I just had a hip replacement 6 weeks ago, and I saw you since that time, right? I saw you three
Yeah,
weeks
yeah.
ago,
A couple weeks ago.
and I'm making very fast progress. So this life as a mime and as a movement artist has really been to my advantage in terms of these kind of physical things that old people get. So
Yeah, we kind of kicked your ass on that trip because we made you walk down to the river and back, and
yeah, that was my first. Now I'm walking downtown to downtown Ashland, which is about 2 miles on these steep hills, steeper
that
than the
was a
one in.
yeah, that was a 2.5 mile walk, half of it uphill. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my first attempt at that. Now I'm doing it every day or every 2 days over here. It's being in Ashland is a good therapy for me because it's a lot of terrain. So
Good place to walk.
yeah,
So talk about Ashland. You talked about your studios, a flying actor studio. Now is that that started in San Francisco?
that started in San Francisco about 2009. Like, originally, I had a studio with my partner Bob in San Francisco in it would have been 2000 or no 1973, 74, 75. Because after Humboldt, I moved to San Francisco and I opened a mime studio because it was still in the golden era of that time, right on Powell Street by the cable car.
And that's when you met Shields.
That's when I met Shields. So uh, the Flying Actor, that was called Menagerie Mime Theater back then, because that was the name of our group. Bob and I, our duo was the Menagerie Mime Theater. And Flying Actor came about in the 2009. I went into partnership with Leonard Pitt, who's a
Mhm.
little older than me, but he's a well-known Decru based mime from San Francisco, from Berkeley. So then, as we talked about before, after 3 years, I got an offer to teach at Southern Oregon University, and I couldn't take the feces on the sidewalk in our alcove on the street in San Francisco much more. So moved to Ashland to work at the university up here, and I did that for 4.5 years, and then I was 69 at that time, and I decided, this is enough of this institutional stuff.
Mm.
So anyway, I built a studio off the house here that I continued the Flying Actor workshops for a while. But right now, I'm not all game to teach. I mean, when I worked for you, just the last few years, I was at the cusp of kind of being burned out. You probably felt that. I was kind of mailing it in, and I just
Well, even mailing it in was, come on. But you know, you said after the last one, you said, "Oh, I don't think I need to do that anymore."
yeah. So um, yeah, so I'm still in somewhat demand as a teacher. I get these wayward emails about workshops, but it's kind of defunct right now, the flying actor. But I'm
Well, in fact, I have my book, but this picture of you on the cover is actually the last workshop you taught.
Yeah, it's actually the last one I've done for an institution too, the very last one. And it's so interesting that photo,
Yeah, it's like, oh,
got a mask on, like it's kind of a
yeah.
weird photo,
It's a weird photo. It's a photo of its time for sure.
How is that book doing?
Doing okay. We're selling a few copies. I'm selling about one or two a day.
That's good. I'm impressed by your initiative of how you got the word out.
Well, no one's going to find it if I don't, because oh, a bestseller, a physical theater curriculum.
Yeah, I have to figure out. I have to get the energy to try to work on my publication. But
Yeah, because your book, you might have to die first for it to sell, but
yeah, it's kind of an art book. But
well,
I'm
and
thinking, I'm just kind of thinking of writing. I have all these exercises. All my material is written down somewhere. So I'm kind of thinking I should actually do an instructional or method book that's maybe I have a student, a former student who's a really good drawer, so maybe I'll do sort of something in the same format, but more pedantic, like pedagogy.
kind of like, well, kind of a step by step like mine is, because
Yeah,
the book you wrote it's very much you. It's kind of your mystical ideas,
right.
and the illustrations are fantastic.
Yeah, and I haven't heard from that guy from Spencer in a while, which is kind of curious to me because he was really involved in the formation of in the making of this thing, and then I haven't reached out or I haven't heard from him, so I don't I have to do that anyway. It's kind of it's a little bit like we were talking about. I kind of build something and then I leave it. I'm throwing my stuff around. my
Well,
my
you
artistic trash around and walk away.
well, just from seeing your workshops, you never do the same thing twice. Not exactly, and so
Yeah,
that's the artist's way. It's
yeah. I mean the method is the same, but yeah, I tend to try to
the
keep
result. The
I
result is
tend to keep myself amused as well as one of the reasons I was a pretty good teacher is I could take advantage of the moment. I could read the room pretty well, like what
yeah,
was going on in the
yeah.
classroom, and I'd switch gears easily. So
And you improvise well.
yeah.
Uh, just a couple more things before we turn this over to Larry. Who
Is
and
Larry watching this?
no, but he has to edit it. So good luck, Larry.
I don't even know what this is for. I don't.
It's some series of
Yeah,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah. I know. I know. I kind of know what it is, but
yeah,
anyway,
but yeah,
he,
I didn't
he
mean to
wants me.
bring.
I'll interview you next. He suggested I interview you, which I should do. So
Well, this is kind of what I envisioned it would end up being, is us kind of interviewing each other. But
right. But I saw the list of questions, and I'm going like, I don't want to talk about some of that stuff. But you're
I
you're
know,
talking about the other stuff.
I
Yeah,
have the list here, I actually wrote my own list of questions.
yeah, right.
Um, but I do want to ask, who do you admire? Who's influential to you through your career?
Well, I had this first acting teacher was very influential in terms
Philip
of the
Mann.
spirit. I think he was a spirit of theater, just Philip Mann. I would encourage you to read. I mean, I actually have an extra copy of The Eye of the Queen. I should
I,
next time
I,
I see you,
I
I
wrote
should
down
give
the
it
I
to
wrote
you.
down the title, and I'd like to see your adaptation too.
Yeah, I wrote a long. It's actually one of these kind of pieces that you have to stop and have dinner before you continue. It's a long, kind of interesting immersion into this world. You could have giant puppets. I mean, it's. I mean, we'll talk about that later. But
yeah.
uh, Philip Mann for his energy and his spirit and his kind of knowledge of the way things are. I mean, the guy was pretty phenomenal, dude. And then I had another teacher there called Philip Rothrock, who was a set designer and a director. He always supported me. He died of cancer recently. Both Philip Mann and he have died.
They
I
were
mean,
both
we're
in Humboldt.
Yeah, Philip Rothrock died quite a while ago. And then I had a mentor in Europe, Dimitri, who was a very famous Swiss clown, classic clown, musical clown. He was the one that actually, he and his wife brought me to Europe in the 70s to tour and perform in his theater in the Italian. He was from the Italian part of Switzerland.
Hmm.
And then I always thought there's those three. And then I always thought that Bob Francisconi was my teacher also. Like I always felt my comrade and my cohort that this guy was also my teacher.
He was your son.
I used to put his name on resumes of like who are your teachers? I say Bob Francisconi, but we were partners, but
Interesting.
I just felt that he was one of my teachers, as maybe I was for him. So I'm trying to think of anybody else. But those are the ones that come to mind right
Well,
now.
aside from Robert, who we've talked about, who are your other peers of your generation that are still kind of out there right now?
Well, Mummenschanz, which are I just actually Alina and I just went to watch their performance at Cal State Northridge last year. And they had a company, I knew the originals. That one original is still working. The woman, I can't remember her name right now, but I met them when I was when was it? 1974. And their style was very influential for me, the Mummenschanz mask theater style, even though I didn't know them personally so much. But that she's still working with Mummenschanz. Their work is kind of not what it used to be. It's a little disappointing. I don't want to talk too much about it. I don't like criticizing others so much, but Robert Shields has retired, even though we talk occasionally. I don't think there's a lot of kind of young people, mostly in other countries, that are kind of interested in mime. But
What about Bill
my
Owen?
age, I don't think there's anybody my age performing. I'll be 78 next week. So yeah, I don't I'm sure there's somebody somewhere. I guess Karen Hoyer, who was one of my students, who's probably 12 years younger than me, she's still working in the Chicago area. But
So it's 78 artificial hip, and moving forward, you're going to be it's all new territory for.
yeah, I mean, I've even toyed with the idea of acting. I mean, I've done some acting roles in the last 2 years that people have really complimented me. People who I respect have really said I did a good job. So the only thing there is, like you said earlier, I've been such an independent guy. I can't stand green rooms,
Right.
the culture of a green room. I don't like sitting around waiting to go on. I don't think I could be in a show for more than 25 times before it would be boring,
Yeah, I'm with you there.
So I don't know. I think my acting projects, like there's a chance I might get to play Macbeth next summer in Washington State at the Island Shakespeare Festival.
That would be awesome.
So and Alina would be Lady Macbeth, which would be
That'd be,
pretty interesting.
can't miss that.
So that's a role I've always really, treasured and enjoyed. I like to play. I have no superstitions about it. I think I might be Macbeth. I don't know, but
Yeah, I mean, you see daggers.
yeah. So yeah, right. Ghosts and daggers. So I'm toying with the idea of. I mean, I've had chances in my life to go deeper into acting. Like I had a whole doorway into Hollywood at one point, which is a whole nother story. But I walked away from that to coach my JV basketball team. That's how all that ended at Santa Barbara High School. But I had quite a few experiences in Hollywood that were very lucrative, and the work was kind of boring, but it was kind of an exciting environment to be in. It was Hollywood, right, with all the
Right. Well, it is a
trappings, right,
creative
all the
environment, and the money's good.
luxuries, But so I don't know. I think I probably will write something again.
Mm.
Because I have my 20 steps to mime, it's pretty involved. It's a document. I have all kinds of documents because I've always been a note taker. I even have notebooks from when I was teaching in 1970 of exercises, and you can see the evolution of where they've come to now. but what the chrysalis was. I have lots of material.
Yeah, you've got another book in you, I think, for sure.
Yeah, and you know, I know that my pedagogy and my method is unique in the mime world because I think it even, and this is maybe my ego talking, but I think some of the things I do go deeper than Lecoq went, and go deeper than what's the big form that's popular in actor training? You know what it is? What's it with a movement ensemble improv? What's that?
Oh,
What's it called?
not not Suzuki.
No, the other one. It's connected to the Suzuki. What? I am
Oh,
Bogart's thing. What's that called?
viewpoints.
Viewpoints. I have a viewpoint system that I started the same time she did. That and she ripped hers off actually from modern dance, and I was influenced by modern dance. But I have a system that I've taught for decades that's more thorough and more gets better results than her viewpoints. But I'm just not a commercial guy. I don't promote my stuff like they do. So this is my ego talking, but I firmly believe that. People have
Well,
told me.
your ego is important because it's true. Yeah, and I think that's the nature of physical, and certainly my book is entirely derivative, but it's also mine. Just like
Yeah,
and you told me once, you won't remember this, but I was crediting everything I did, and you said you don't have to do that. Just say what it is. It's yours. It's yours because you
yeah, I believe that. Yeah, we're all derivative. I mean, everything's derivative, everything.
exactly.
But I think you've made it you've made it your own. Like you're a master at that, that particular area that you were teaching in for all these years.
Yeah, and there was a vacuum there, and certainly you filled a vacuum. But we could all fill vacuums if we
Yeah, I mean, one thing about me is I enjoy the process. I really enjoy the process.
yeah
That's why I never went full into performance because I generally like teaching and trying to and figuring out why things work. I really like
right
that process.
yeah
You know,
experimenting
yeah,
and
I really enjoy
well that's
that
what I
process.
call yeah my class I saw it as a laboratory because
Right.
it was more important to have those aha moments and move on to something else to me.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
I hate repeating stuff. I can, but it's just not interesting. It's a whole different side of my brain when I'm repeating something I already know.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit, like in the art world, artists go through all these periods of like Picasso with his blue period. They go through
Right.
these periods where they do a series of paintings that are a little bit different, but there's difference. There's little nuances, difference in these periods. So I think what we've done is the same thing. There's a thrust of approach, but you're approaching it a little different way in this package. So then you shift to another way.
And the danger is getting stuck on somebody's method or moment. I mean, even Stanislavski moved on. His stuff was so badly misinterpreted because at the end of his life, he's just like, no, that's not what I'm doing at all anymore.
Isn't that interesting?
This is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, like Ochowski, that the impact he had on, theater. But I remember when I was teaching at UCSB, he was looking for a umbrella place, and he came to UCSB while I was teaching there to look over the facilities because there was the possibility they would give him his kingdom, right? And I remember he walked into the Hatland Theater and he goes, "Shit space, shit space." And then he rejected UCSB, but he was eventually given his own kind of outbuilding, a studio at UC Irvine, and he finished out his years out in some field working on some mysterious process that he never brought it into the light at UC Irvine. So it's interesting how that stuff happens.
Well, that's about all I can think of to talk about right now. I mean, we could go off on tangents forever, but
Forever, we can talk forever. It's easy. You're a very easy person to talk to.
well, likewise, and yeah, that's why we get along because we
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to see more of you. I mean, too bad we don't live in the same town. We'd hang out probably a lot.
Yeah,
So
I want to. You guys do Macbeth. We're definitely coming up to see.
yeah,
I got several trips planned up north, but none of them look like Ashland
You
right
should
now.
definitely come to Ashland with
Yeah, well, I've
Carrie
got,
and hang out.
because my brother lives there. We got two.
Yeah.
It'd be great to have like a big dinner with all of us because
Oh, it'd be,
you would really like Matt.
oh yeah, I bet I would. Yeah.
He's like me. It's just that he didn't go
Yeah.
into arts. He's a better singer than I am,
Yeah.
and I use him in my readings for this Port Chicago play I do, and he's one of my best readings because he just says the words.
Wow.
He doesn't fuck around.
Wow. What's going on with Port Chicago right now?
We have a gig in August, and then I've got I'm lining up. I'm trying to get a grant because I got a guy who wants to do a documentary, kind of a Ken Burns thing.
Cool.
And he's going to actually be in this next reading, but he's the one who filmed me last 2 years ago. He did a documentary when we were doing The Grapes of Wrath, and he's a really good filmmaker, but he's also an actor. So we're going to try and do. I need a project in my life, or I self-destruct. So this would be something I can sink my teeth into because we still have sites we can go film, and there's still a few survivors, and so there's all this stuff that maybe it's
Yeah, it's a part of. I just ordered a book online called Golden State: The Making of California. It's a history of California,
yeah,
starting with the conquistadors. It's
yeah.
written by a Pulitzer Prize winner that writes for the L.A. Times. So I just started, but Port Chicago, that whole world you're describing, there's hardly anything out there about that. What
It's
happened
near,
or
it,
anything?
the town has been nearly erased from history.
Right.
So one of the groups it's called California Revealed, and it's a state-sponsored archive of obscure California history.
Wow.
And they're trying to reach out to academics to include it into history curriculum, and so they're excited about the information I have. And I have original tapes of interviews of people that are all dead now that
Yeah.
talked about the moment of the big explosion that sort of destroyed the town. And
It's interesting. Even, I think in school we had a little bit of California history. Definitely not even though I was a history major, I'm sure maybe there was an area about but it's always been obscure. And I was hoping this book I just ordered would be more in depth, but I'm finding that it's still kind of it's kind of just touching on vague things that happen with these explorers and stuff. And I don't know if there
right.
really is anything that about California out there. There must be somewhere like this group you're talking about or something.
The best stuff about California history I'm finding is the stuff that people self-publish because they're pursuing something they're passionate about. But
Yeah.
the people who are writing the history, that it's just names and dates.
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't get a feel for what,
Right,
I mean, he's brushed, all the indigenous people that were killed and destroyed during the mission period. It's like it's just kind of passed over. I'm going, whoa, this is like
right,
world tragedy, like.
and I'm discovering that the indigenous tribes in the Sacramento Delta region were incredibly advanced and totally in tune with this sort of amazing ecosystem that was at work, in Suisun Bay and San Pablo Bay,
Yeah,
and there's
I
all
don't
these
know anything about
there's
that.
all these islands up in the mouth of the Sacramento River, which is near where
Uh,
Chicago were, and they're finding prehistoric stuff on these islands,
I bet. Yeah.
elaborate civilizations that were in tune with hunting and fishing, and
Yeah,
it's
it's interesting. So I just started reading this, but I think two or three times the Spanish explorers passed by San Francisco Bay because it was either shrouded in fog or they,
right.
they they missed the entrance, the
It's the
Golden
turnoff.
Gate. Yeah, they missed the whole area. They found Monterey Bay, but then they ended up, north on Point Reyes or someplace, like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. But I was amazed how so many of the crews, like 2/3 of the crews would die of scurvy and stuff. I mean, it was these expeditions. I mean, they like only a few people survived those things, like I was trying to imagine what that would have been like to be marching around California before roads or being on a ship for 3 months, like a
Right.
small ship. Those ships weren't very big, like.
And to find Port Reyes and go, well, here we are, we've arrived. It's like,
Yeah, right.
phrase. It's like it's windy and it's cold and
And there's a Russian around the bend, that came from the other direction,
right, right.
like.
All right.
Well, that's fun. Yeah, I definitely want to interview you. We
That
should.
was fun. Yeah, that was fun. I do it
Yeah.
again. Uh, I haven't had as many professional adventures as you have, but anyway.
Well, they're all on their own.
Yeah, it's
I
all
was
right.
looking at some of the interviews that that little demonstration tape that you probably
Yeah, I
looked at.
kind of glanced
They're
at it.
kind of they're not like this one.
No, no, no. This is more like my dinner with Andre. Yeah. All right. Well, good. So I'm gonna tell Larry it's over, and we did
All
it,
right.
and then we're looking forward to changing roles
Yeah.
whenever
Cool.
it suits us. All right, man.
All right.
Take care, buddy.
See you later.
See ya.
Say hi to Carrie.
Yeah. Hi to Alina. Hey.
She's
Oh,
right. Alina's right there. Say hi to Jeff, Alina.
hi, Alina.
She's coming over here.
Tara.
Carrie and Tara. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
I
How are
can't hear
you?
you, but
Yeah, we
Oh.
had a big dinner with
Sorry.
our friends, and we missed you. You would have been right at home.
in your interview,
No, just last weekend we had dinner
Sorry,
with
hold on.
we had dinner with Larry and
Dinner with
Tara
Larry.
and Susan
Well,
and
it's not
Angie
it.
and
hold on, Jeff, hold on.
No,
talking
It's not
about you
in.
guys.
I couldn't
now
hear
it's in.
because I pushed it in.
Okay.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we missed you last weekend. We had a big dinner with we made a paella in our backyard.
Oh wow.
Who did?
Oh yeah, I saw a photograph on Facebook
Yeah.
with everybody.
Who's we?
Me and Larry and Tara and Carrie and Susan
Right.
and Lindsay.
But who made the paella?
I did. Well, actually, I taught Tara to make it. Tara
I-
did it, but I was coaching her the whole way. I learned how to
Oh.
make paella in Valencia, Spain. And
Send
so
me
I
your
do it.
recipe.
Well, that's a part of your life that's really interesting.
I do it in the Spanish tradition. It's not a recipe you write down.
Okay.
It's like clowning.
A pinch of this, a pinch of that.
Where did you
Yeah.
did you know somebody there that you kind of observed?
We felt they had these clubs that gather. They plan all year for the Lent celebration. Where they burn these figures and call it Las Falleros. And so we fell in with these guys. They kind of adopted the Yankees, and they took us in and they showed us. The men showed me how to make paella because only the men make paella.
Oh my
They
God.
literally took me away from the women to show me this thing.
Interesting.
Really, it's just
Maybe
an
that's
excuse to bullshit and
maybe
drink.
that's maybe that's where the name comes from. Para ella. Él makes it para ella. Paella.
Huh.
That's an interesting theory.
Yeah.
Say, have you you started rehearsals? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw a picture. Is that the Don Quixote modern?
Nuevo.
Quixote
Yeah, Nuevo.
Nuevo.
Quixote
Yeah.
Nuevo. Yeah, it's today in time. It's about a man who's got dementia. And he thinks he's Quixote. In his
Great.
dimension world, everybody's trying to help him through it as we're trying to put him in a nursing home.
So, do you get to go to all the rehearsals?
Oh, yeah, Jeff, this is the weird. I've never understudied, and I'm at OSF, so I will mop floors if they want me to. My contract doesn't start till June 27th. That's in a week. They bring in the understudies at Tech, which was like, dude, I have a house. I can come 3 weeks early. Can I be in the room? And they said, yeah, as long as you volunteer. We're not, you're not. I said, no pay. I need to be in that room. So I've been coming to rehearsal for 2 weeks now on my time because I want to learn the show.
Well, they expect you to be off book when you show up, though, don't they?
Yeah, and I am, but this is a big show. It's actually, James, 2.5 hours.
Really?
The show. It's a lot of music, a lot of dancing, movement, not dancing, movement, masks, puppets. I mean, it's huge. How can you expect someone from the sideline at a Tech rehearsal to learn all that? So anyway,
it's a mystery, but you will.
Yeah, no, but that's why I'm there. I'm in the room. I'm learning the show. I've learned Act 2. Now we're starting. They start Act 1.
You guys should definitely come up here and visit if you can, so we can meet your brother.
Gonna try to do it. We're talking about October maybe, but
yeah, the shows are great, Jeff. I've seen 3 of them. Wow. The caliber is like Broadway stuff here. Yeah. Anyway, I gotta go cook.
Yeah, and
I'm hungry.
I gotta sign off because poor Larry has to watch this and edit it.
I love ya.
Love you too.
All right.
See you guys later.
I'll see you later.
Yep. I don't know how to turn this off.
There's maybe down the corner it says leave. Does it say? Oh,
Oh,
you're the
no,
you're the
I think we just leave.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah. Even if you're the host, you just leave.
Okay, I'm leaving.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.